Welcome to the East Bay's best podcast, The Capstone Conversation. This is a show that interviews political, government, and community leaders in Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solano counties. We look at what is going on in your city, how are we developing things economically, and where are we going from here? I'm your host, Jared Ash. Hi, welcome to today's Capstone Conversation. I'm your host, Jared Ash, where we are talking about community events, government, and other activities in the greater East Bay. Typically, we've been interviewing city officials about economic development, transportation, infrastructure, general things about what's happening in their cities. Today, we're going to take a different tact on that, and we're going to talk to city leaders in Walnut Creek and Clayton. And over the last couple of months, throughout the entire East Bay, but particularly in Contra Costa, Solano Space this, even down on the Central Coast, they have seen a message of hate is starting to come up. And hate groups are taking advantage of Zoom communications, telecommunications to call into city council meetings and preach hateful messages and have verbally attacked council members, called for their death, even in some cases, and posted flyers in their communities. And so today we're going to talk to Councilmember Wilk in Walnut Creek and Councilmember Tillman in Clayton about how this issue has hit home for them and really understanding what is going on in our communities, where hate is coming from, and help maybe give you some ideas. So if you see something, you could do something about it as an individual. First, I'm going to call on them to actually introduce themselves. Wilk, if you want to go first, if you can give us your background.
Sure. I'm a Walnut Creek City Council member. I was elected in 2016 following a fairly long career in internet marketing. And when I first got elected, I took a step back from working full-time to really give my full-time attention to being the best council member that I could in Walnut Creek and really be a voice for our area within the region. And reelected in 2020, I was mayor in 2021 as we rotate mayors in most of the cities in Contra Costa that are under 100,000 people. And everything has gone pretty much according to plan without a lot of surprises until this past June. And I know we're going to get into that.
Great. Holly, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you for having me on, Jared. I'm Holly Tillman. I'm a council member in the city of Clayton, and I was elected in 2020. I moved to the Bay Area from Southern California, so I'm a native Californian. And I moved up here in 1999, moved to Clayton in 2003. And was very involved in the community as far as working, volunteering for our parent faculty club, being instrumental in being a coach for CY track for a local Catholic church. So very involved in the community. And then I decided to run for an elected official in 2020 during COVID. As Kevin said, we do rotate positions. I was vice mayor last year. I'm a council member this year, and we rotate every December. And we have not experienced what we're about to get into to the extent that Kevin has in his city. But as you mentioned, it is important that people understand how they can help and be allies. And I will shine a little bit of a light on that today.
And just to highlight the two cities, while Clayton and Walnut Creek are neighbors and have a good working relationship, a lot of people go in between the cities and commute down to Nesia. You're two very different cities, right? Well, I'll let Holly, can you describe Clayton for people? One of the smallest city in the county population wise, right?
Yes, we have about 11,000 people in our city. It was incorporated in 1964. It sits right at the base of Mount Diablo. So it's actually over the hill from Walnut Creek. And it's a mixed population, but I would say 85% of our residents are Caucasian, and we have about 1.4% African-American. I believe it was about 9% are Latino, and then a mix of Asian, et cetera. So I wouldn't say that we're extremely diverse, but we do have quite a few different population segments that do live here in Clayton. It's very rural in some aspects. We still have our old saloon that's here. People can go and hitch their horses behind it still. There's a hitching post. And you can sometimes see a horse actually walking down the street. And so, yes, we are not a transportation hub. So a lot of people do have issues with that. I would say we're about 95% single family homes, and a few people do rent. But we do not have apartments. We have condos that are down the street actually from me. And we have our first apartment building complex that's going to be built here in our downtown area. That will be 3 buildings. And that's sitting on about a little over 3 acres, I believe, 81 units. And believe it or not, that has been a point of contention for quite a few years here in town. And even more, it's ginned up again because the developer has started breaking ground. So very different from Walnut Creek.
And so Walnut Creek actually has a urban center. People are familiar with the downtown area, lots of shopping, lots of retail. Broadway Plaza is one of the largest outdoor malls and malls in Northern California. We also have suburban, so all the different neighborhoods, and we have rural as well as we get into some of the different areas that are unincorporated. We've got about 75,000 people that are in the incorporated city and another 15,000 that have Walnut Creek as an address. Our sphere of influence is about 90,000 people, and we are a job center, although not as large a job center as we're trying to still achieve between Shadelands Business Park and different aspects of the business community. But similar to the demographics that you mentioned in Clayton, we're probably about 85% white. I think we're looking at about 10 to 12% Asian, and then a mix of a variety of different ethnicities in the last 3 to 4%. It is considered a wealthier community. Much of Central Contra Costa is. And of course, we're the way that people do get through to Clayton. They got to come through Walnut Creek to get to Concord and Pleasant Hill and other areas as well. Ignacio Valley Road, which goes through Walnut Creek, and people will commute to there going to Pittsburgh, Antioch, and even Brentwood, is the most heavily traveled road in Contra Costa County that's not a freeway.
That's helpful so everybody knows where you're coming from. Councilman Wilk, let's talk about what happened in June. What has spurred this message of hate?
We know that there was a rise in anti-Semitism and hate over the last 10 years. There had been a spike of it in the last 6 years. We really hadn't seen anything that had been localized. And then our first city council meeting in June, we opened up public communication to all people that were in the audience in the chamber, as well as on Zoom, as we've been doing ever since we were back in person. We kept a hybrid format available. And we had a couple of callers into Zoom as usual. And then we had several callers in a row in an organized fashion that called in spreading anti-Semitism, hate that was directed at me as well as the Jewish community. And when they were cut off after a warning, the next person called in talking about freedom of speech issues. They're not able to be shut down. We could be sued. The next person called in talking about the Brown Act. Another person called in talking about case study. So it was obvious they were in an organized fashion. We didn't know who these people were. They didn't have their videos on. They had anonymous names. And we were stunned that this had suddenly happened in Walnut Creek. That was the first time we'd heard about it. I started paying a little bit more attention to what was going on after that. And unfortunately, there then started to be some other things that were happening in very racist, hateful, anti-Semitic tones. My name, for example, was put on a billboard above Highway 24 with a Jewish star and a white pride banner next to it. I had received some very hateful emails. We also were hit with other Zoom anti-Semitic callers at our next meeting, and it happened for several meetings in a row, which moved between anti-Semitism to racism, anti-LGBTQ, anti-Semitism and hate always being part of it all. And then we started to hear about this happening in other cities nearby. And that's when I really started getting involved with the Anti-Defamation League. And at that point, I'll end you. We can hear what Holly and what Clayton experienced when they heard about this, and then any other questions you've got too.
Before I do that, are these people in your community, or where are they coming from?
Yeah, so we did hear from the ADL that they'd identified who these people were, and evidently they had called into other areas, but not in California at that point. Turns out 2 of the people were from outside the county, one from Modesto, one from Vallejo, and 2 people from outside the state, one from Georgia, one from Michigan. So in a way, I felt comforted that these weren't people in my backyard, But obviously, just the fact that we'd had anti-Semitic and racist flyers that were strewn on the border of Walnut Creek and Concord over the last several months, and my name being on a banner across Highway 24, there were people and activity that were here, literally in our backyard. And it's good to know that these Zoom callers aren't from here. But of course, when it comes to Zoom, you're able to open it up to anybody calling from anywhere in the country.
Right. And so is Clayton experiencing this, or what are you experiencing in Clayton?
No, we have not experienced that level at all. The first time I heard about this even happening in our area was when Kevin posted about it and shared it on social media. And I immediately reached out and just let me know how I can support you, whatever help you need. And he's done the same for me. The first instance that I had actually been very vocal online was earlier this year when we had a racist incident at a middle school where someone handed out cotton balls during Black History Month. And they were handing them out to some of the Black students and to other students as well, saying Happy Black History Month, and thought it was a joke, and it wasn't funny. So I found out about a week after the event happened, and I was appalled because I had assumed that the district had taken care of it, that they hadn't been informed. As soon as I found out from another parent whose daughter actually tried to speak up about it. And then I actually did a little intel to find out if other friends were involved and had the same thing happen to them. And I'll come back to that in just a second. I immediately contacted the president of the Mount Diablo Unified School District just to ask her, hey, what's going on at Diablo View Middle School? Did you hear about the racist cotton ball incident? She had no idea what I was talking about. So she immediately called the superintendent to see if he knew, since it would have probably gone to him. He wasn't aware of it either. So what it showed was that there was a breakdown in normal protocol, which is to inform the district if these incidents happen. And apparently this was not the first time. There had been students that were complaining about being called monkeys. These are Black students. They had been called cotton pickers. And so that had gone on. Teachers had reported it to the principal. And in my opinion, nothing was done. The school district then took over at that point, made sure that they contacted the principal and figured out a way to make this, I don't like to call it a teaching moment, but for lack of a better word, it needed to be. And I was more concerned because the students who not only witnessed it, but it was happening to, their parents weren't told about it, right? So it didn't go out to the school community. It also wasn't raised up to the district level. So the superintendent sent a letter saying, hey, we found out about this incident. That's when everyone found out. And that was problematic because what it told those students who experienced it and that were witnesses were that they weren't, I don't want to call them not safe, but they were looking for the adults in the room to do something and to know that there is a safe haven there and that something's being done. Although the student there was one student who was punished for it, although there were 8 or 9 that were involved. It was a student who supposedly brought them to campus that was disciplined, but also used that as a teaching moment for him individually to understand exactly how come that was a racist incident. And that should have been more broadly shared with everyone on campus, right? So it could be a teaching moment for everyone. In my town, based on our demographics, I have been ridiculed since I ran as an elected official for even bringing up race at all. And a lot of people in my city don't like that. So I was told that I was trying to blowing it out of proportion. It was just a joke. On my social media, I'm continually slammed for any time that I mention race. And so the NAACP got wind of this, the actual cotton ball incident. They called a press conference. I found out the morning, 2 hours before they were going to show up, that they were actually coming to our city. I alerted city council as well as our city manager just so that they were aware. I had one council member reach out and say, I can't make it to the actual rally that they wanted to have or the news conference that they wanted to have. I did attend. And the mayor at the time did reach out and say, sorry to hear that this is happening. What's the school doing about it? And then that was the last time that anyone from council reached out. Kevin actually came to another rally that we had a few weeks later because we wanted to have like an anti-hate and anti-racism and anti-bullying rally. And a lot of elected officials from local communities came to stand in support. And that's what it's about. So even though I haven't had those calls coming, I'm doing the same for Kevin and others that are in other neighboring cities. If you're hearing something and people are attacking you, I want other elected officials and our residents to know this is something that you stand up and say, it's not acceptable. And the more that I think that we stand loud and say that, people will realize it's not acceptable. And you have to say something. Just ignoring it or saying this is not within our purview or being afraid of trampling on somebody's First Amendment right. Some people are of the belief that they have the right to say it, but we do not have to stand for that. And we can let them know it's unacceptable. And I think that's what all of us need to do.
That's a great point that Holly just brought up, is that silence does equal complicity. And we know that hate grows in a vacuum. And it's not like people are just hating in one group and then they're not spreading that hate into other groups and marginalized communities as well. And so it's important to stand out. And being in the Jewish community and being a student of studying of history of World War II and the Holocaust, and knowing that 100 years ago, it didn't work for Jews to ignore hate speech and hope that it went away and not want to shed a light on it because then I could make myself a target. So as soon as this happened and the media reached out and I was asked to speak on this, I felt it's really important that we need to do that. We need to call this out. We need to rebuke it, and we all need to stand together. Whether it's anti-Semitism or racism or anti-LGBTQ, it doesn't matter because all of this just moves from one group to another. And if we don't shed a light and call it out, then essentially we've allowed the narrative to be from the hate speech itself. And so I really do appreciate Holly is just one member, an important member of the community, but one member who reached out to me. I was happy to hear that every single city in the county reached out in one way, shape, or form, lending their support, several speaking out. And unfortunately, what we've seen, sure enough, is that through Zoom, these hate groups have now spread their messages of hate using public communications, using the public platform of cities, of counties, of school districts, and even of commissions to call in during public comment and then spreading messages of anti-Semitism, racism, anti-ethnicity, and LGBTQ, and doing what they can to use a public forum to get those messages of hate out. And so we all need to stand against this and rebuke it so that those communities that don't have a voice understand that their elected representatives are standing up for them and what's right.
And I hear the passion in both of you, and I appreciate that this is happening elsewhere, right? We're talking mostly to communities, but you've alluded to give another example or name some places where you've heard of this happening and some concerns that are going on.
Sure. Well, so just in last week, just since, in fact, Holly and I were on a panel about stop hate and what we as elected officials can do to stand up against hate speech and hate crime at the California League of Cities annual conference in Sacramento. Just since then, hate speech has called into communities in Modesto. They've done it in Sonoma City Council, Santa Rosa School District, Livermore City Council. In Monterey, this has happened. In Atherton, in South San Francisco, in Berkeley the other night. What's happened that we have found out about, and there's been more and more media coverage on this, thankfully, is that these hate groups have their sites and their social media that are living in extremist hate areas, and they're providing information, essentially a toolkit with these people that they can recruit. Here's how to call into Zoom meetings and across the country. So I've just given you ones that are in our backyard in the Bay Area, but this is happening up and down the state and across the country. And they're getting these toolkits from these hate providers who even give them swag if they sign up. It's abhorrent. And they are then using that as their outline of how to call in, of what to say. And some of them will try to make it as part of a city council meeting, and then they'll spread the hate. Others will just come out with very ugly verbiage right out of the gate. And it just depends. And what I've seen, what's very interesting is we've heard from attorneys that have a variety of perspectives, ones that say you can cut them off immediately if it's not city business, to other ones that say, well, due to freedom of speech, unless they are making threats, unfortunately, we have to let them stay on, and everything in between. Personally speaking, I have no problem cutting people off when hate speech starts. We've seen that happen in Sacramento and Santa Rosa and other areas. Berkeley, in fact, just cut everybody off of Zoom immediately. And so cities have to determine and weigh the balance between having people calling on Zoom for city business and unfortunately not having Zoom interaction be a way of communicating. People can come in person and people can write in. We'll still broadcast over Zoom, but communities and public boards have to make the decision if they're going to allow Zoom interaction in the future.
I'm chair of the Transit Authority Citizen Advisory Committee, and we still do our meetings on Zoom. Therefore, they are public and public can comment. Now, we don't tend to get very much public comment because we're not the board itself, but we have 4 members that have said if we go back just because of geographic purposes, right? Coming in from Oakley, coming in from Hercules, they won't come into the central location to do a meeting. And so just our members get the benefit of participating via Zoom. And we have some good people. And I participated in state hearings without having to travel to Sacramento. So that would be a shame if we lose that, but I understand where cities are going. Talk about the toolkit on the opposite side. You talked about the toolkit the hate groups have. What's in the other side of it toolkit? What do city officials can have, and what do members of the community that want to combat this message have in our toolkits?
Sure. So one of those toolkits has actually been put out by the Jewish Community Relations Council. They sent this out to every public official in the Bay Area just in the last couple of days. And essentially saying that here's some of the steps that you can take. You can give a warning up front. You can have signs. You can turn your back. You can literally physically turn your back if people are going to be calling out hate speech. Other ones are that you can allow it for agendized items, but not for general public communication. And so you're basically toggling what's allowed in Zoom interaction at that point. And then there are ways that you can also post it on the website. You can even do things where mayors have of cities specifically, or let's say board presidents, have the ability to call on people in certain manners that they don't have to do it first come, first serve. They can pick and choose who they want to speak, when they want to speak. Walnut Creek, back in when the pandemic first started, we changed public comment when I was mayor to have 30 minutes up front and the balance of it at the end of the meeting after the agendized items, because public communication over Zoom, it was taking 2 to 3 hours. We couldn't even get to agendized items until it was almost 10 o'clock at night. And so we changed that. That's what boards can also do. They can change public communication to be some of it up front and the rest afterwards. They can change. It doesn't have to be 3 minutes. It can be 2 minutes. It can be 1 minute. These are all subject to what the boards want to approve. And so there's different ways that they can handle public communication when it's over Zoom.
We should link to that in the show notes if there's a document there or something. Let's make sure we get that, and we'll include that in the show notes for people.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Councilwoman Tillman, what do you think is also in the toolkit past the one that Kevin named here?
Yeah, well, he named almost all of them because we read the same toolkit. The other thing that I would say, or that I would add, is I know in the case of Brentwood that the callers actually waited till it was an agendized item and just talked about the actual agenda item. So it sounded like a regular caller. And then just within just a flip of a switch, they immediately went into their rant. So that council was caught off guard. And so it's going to start to get a little difficult. And I'm not sure how you avoid it unless you just completely turn off Zoom altogether and make them come in person to spew their hate. How you avoid that. And as soon as they were cut off immediately, a lot more hands were raised. So you knew that it was an organized attack because the others knew, okay, well, they didn't get away with it. I'm just going to come out the gate and just do it. I think, as much as I hate it, that I do think that we're going to end up going back to regular streaming, and people, if they want to do public comment, are going to have to send it in by a predetermined deadline before your meeting and then come in person. And I hate that because we have an aging population here in Clayton, as do I'm sure a lot of communities. And I know folks that have young children who can't come to our meetings in the evening. We have definitely gotten a lot more community engagement now that we do have the hybrid model. I have to admit that when I was watching the few council meetings that I've watched since I've lived here for 20 years, there might have been one public comment and 2 people in the audience that you can see on the stream as I was watching it on channel 24 or 26, whatever it was. No one was paying attention. And now people are engaged, and I would hate for us to lose that. But I do think that we're going to end up, all of us, going back to that model. And it's unfortunate. I do often wonder, and I know, Jared, that this is your show and that you ask the questions, but can I ask one?
Yeah,
it maybe pick both of your brains. Is I'm trying to figure out what is the ultimate goal other than hate, right? So they want to spew hate, but is it to get us off Zoom? Because I can't imagine they want their voices to be silenced. they're cowards, so they're not coming into council meetings. So what do you think is the goal?
Well, so in talking with the ADL, unfortunately, I've become somewhat of a semi-expert in hearing what's going on with hate speech and what some of these goals are. Certainly not something that I ever thought I would be diving into. What they're trying to do is to normalize hate speech and numb us to it so that it just becomes another opinion. And we
Oh,
don't
boy.
pay attention to it because this is just their ways of expressing themselves, and it's normalized speech. The other thing, of course, they're trying to do is intimidate. And by intimidating, not speaking out whether it's Black Lives Matter or against different hate causes or pro LGBTQ, all of these under the same banner. Intimidation, numbing us, and trying to normalize the speech. My concern, and what I've told the media before, my concern is not that the media is then going to put a focus on this and call this out as abhorrent. My concern is when the media stops doing it and it becomes so normal that it's not news anymore because this is just another day.
Yeah. The thing that's on my mind is I have 3 young daughters, right? All under the age of 9. Is how do I teach them to be open-minded, let's just say, right? To not listen to that language. Easier said than done, right? When things happen, when people bring things into school, and there's out of 9 kids, right? There's got to be 2 that just did it because their friends were doing it, right? And didn't know any better. But how do you teach them to just be aware of it, right? I don't know. You guys have any answers to that?
Well, we've talked about it in my house since we have 2 daughters. I have a sophomore in college and a senior in high school. And so from a young age, they just talk to them like they were little mini adults, I guess. But even if I think about the Black Lives Matter movement and think about friends here that we have in town, we have a diverse group of friends that we hang around with. And so one of those families is 2 gay men, and they have two brothers who actually happen to be Black. And they live down the street from a family, good friends of ours. So their daughter is the same age as my daughter, and they have a younger daughter that's the same age as the gay couple's youngest son. So all of us kind of have kids that can pair up with each other. And the ally, the young white daughter, she's hearing all of these things that are happening to the young Black son of our other friends. And she has learned from when they were little in elementary school, you don't allow that to happen. So if you hear him being attacked, you speak up. And you tell people when you're little kids, that's not nice. I don't know how old your children are, Jared, but that's not nice, right? And so that's how it starts when you're in elementary school. And then as you get to middle school, you can be a lot more vocal, which happened around the cotton ball incident, where the school district decided they were going to do small, in English class and history class, I think it was, they wanted to have small breakout groups within your own classroom and let people freely speak and tell how they felt about the incident. And some people thought it was whatever, it's not that big of a deal. They were normalized to it, right? To Kevin's point. Whereas others, and this young girl just said, no, it was hateful. This is wrong. It is racist. This is not what we do. Well, she got in trouble after that session because one of the boys that was in class didn't like that after the class was over, based on how he was speaking in the class. And, of course it was a safe space, that she let him know his way of thinking and his actions were racist. So she's the one who got in trouble because she let him know that his actions were racist. And when her mom was called and told, hey, your daughter spoke to this boy and it was supposed to be a safe space. And afterwards she told him that he was a racist. And the mom says, well, hold on a minute. What did the boy say? And it was racist word that he used. And so the mom said, so why are you calling me? She did absolutely what she was supposed to do, which was, I get that you wanted that to be a safe space, but we have taught her from a young age that if you hear something like that, you speak up and you let people know it's not acceptable. So she did absolutely what she was supposed to do. And he says, well, other families at this school don't have those kind of conversations. She says, that is not my problem. That is not my problem. We have taught our children, if you hear something, you speak up and you say something. She did absolutely everything right. She's not in trouble. I will not be coming to come have a conversation with her, send her back to class. So I think that if you have those conversations and you teach them at a young age, what is right, what is wrong, Unfortunately, people who are spewing hate speech think that they're right and we're wrong. But I think in my heart, I know that there are more that side and think, as all of us do, because as much hatred as we have in this country, I think we have a lot more people who aren't hateful, but they are also afraid to speak up. And I mentioned this last week on our panel that some people don't know, they're not confrontational, so they aren't sure how they can help. And I think if you aren't one who will vocalize and tamp down when you hear something hateful, then you at least need to learn how to be an upstander. And an upstander doesn't have to necessarily be somebody who speaks it. They can stand with the people who are. And I think the more of us who are standing up together, and that means side by side standing together. So whether that's on the playground or at a news conference or whatever it might, a rally, whatever it might be, the more people who are standing there side by side with you lets the haters know, okay, maybe I'm not going to get away with this as much as I think I'm going to. And I even think for councils, if we're going to take a stand and people are going to use something from the toolkit, and I think there were cities who were putting up signs saying not acceptable, it's got to be a unified front. I think if you've got anybody who is unwilling to do that, you may as well just take away the Zoom, because what you're showing then is there's a door opening there. And those people are not going to stop. They're going to continue to say, okay, well, you know what? I've at least got a few people that are agreeing with me here who are going to allow me to do this. And I think that councils are going to have to take the hard look at, we're either going to be unified or we just need to shut it off. Because believe it or not, there are council members who are sitting on the dais who believe the hate speech, who subscribe to that. And that's also dangerous.
That's shocking to hear that you're saying that there are people on the dais that agree with the hate speech. And I'm so sorry to hear that. And boy, I would sure like to have conversations with them. But I will say that, let me leverage what you just said. First of all, completely agree with your entire story there, Holly. So glad to hear that there are families out there that are teaching their children and really talking about acceptance, which is what we've done with our kids. It's not that we taught them that the hate speech was bad, although certainly it was. We taught them about what acceptance is and that people are human beings and to accept through love. And certainly they understand what is not acceptable. I will say that in talking about standing united, about 2 months ago, we had at Temple Isaiah in Lafayette a gathering organized by the Jewish Community Relations Council through their Here I Am program. We had 40 elected officials. There are only a few were Jewish. There's not many Jewish elected officials in these meetings. We had 40 elected officials that came to Lafayette in the middle of a day and stood up against hate. We had our Congressman, Mark DeSaulnier. We had State Senator Steve Glazer, 2 Assembly members, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan and Tim Grayson. We had multiple mayors and council members. I spoke. Tessa Rudnick of El Cerrito spoke. We had Alex Griffin also spoke. And what's powerful beyond us standing up for our own community is standing up for other communities that where anti-Semitism had been the target of all of this hate speech. We had everybody of every ethnicity and gender identification and religion standing up. And that's what I've committed to. And that's what we all committed to in Sacramento last week, is we're going to stand up for each other. That if there is racism going on against the Black community, you can count on me. I will be there to stand up against it. I will stand shoulder to shoulder with Holly and others. And if there is anti-LGBTQ, I will stand there as I have been in the past and will continue to do. And people need to stand up, whether it's for Judaism or for any of these other areas. Together, we're powerful, and we can't have people that are deciding to stand on the sidelines because this is not their group or they don't want to make themselves a target. We've got to stand up and rebuke this as one whole body, because otherwise hate speech is always going to exist, but we've got to make sure that it remains unacceptable.
And that's what I meant. So it doesn't necessarily mean that someone is saying hateful things. It's the not supporting everything you just now mentioned. And so I'll give a perfect example. We have our Clayton Pride event that we have here, and you participated in. A lot of elected officials in our county have participated in. And when you have people who don't support it, who are elected officials, they're picking and choosing which things they want to stand up for. And so we have received messages of, I don't want to call it hate, but they're anti-LGBTQ. And so when you have people who don't support that, you can't make everybody support everything. Either you have to take a stance and we're going to stand up for hatred, period. But if you've got people who don't ascribe to that or subscribe to that, then it's hard to find allies in everything. I guess people are picking and choosing what they're allies for. The only thing I am an ally against, regardless of who the group is, hate. There are a lot of people who don't feel that way. That's the point I'm trying to make. So they might stand up and they might attend something that is fighting anti-Semitism. They might fight for something that is blatantly hateful, but that doesn't mean that they're going to support the LGBTQ movement. And it doesn't mean they're going to support the African-American community and go and march with the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you see what I mean? They're not going to stand and be an ally for everything.
You're talking the shoulder to shoulder comment that Kevin made is you just got to stand up against hate, no matter what the hate is.
But that's me. And not everybody is willing to do that, is my point.
Yeah.
We can't force every elected official to want to do that because some of them sit on dioceses up and down the state, up around the country. If you just think about our politics, that is what happens. Everybody's not going to agree with everything. And you have people across the political spectrum who do not agree. Think about school boards and how hateful people are trying to infiltrate school boards now so that they can change the curriculum.
Take us home. What is the message you want people who are listening to take away from this? Let's have Kevin go first and then Holly.
Sure. I think what we just discussed, which is all standing up and making a proactive determination that when this happens, I'm standing up for it. I'm not going to sit in the corner and say, oh, that's just terrible what happened in Brentwood, or that's just awful what's going on in Richmond. No, it's speaking out. If there's an event, showing up for an event, posting on social media to your own community that this happened in Clayton. This is not acceptable. We in Walnut Creek are a welcoming community, and we rebuke any of these kind of racist activities that have happened that people have done, and we stand with Clayton on this. And so those are the kind of things. Our own social media hits our own network, and most of us in elected office have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of supporters and followers in our communities. We can hit 100,000 people easily if we all take this stance that we're going to stand up for each other. That's what we need. It's nice to hear people coming up to me when I'm at a different conference or an event and appreciating what happened and just saying, I'm so sorry. Yes, thank you. I do appreciate that. Now post it on your page that this is not acceptable. Use my post and just forward it. That's fine. I will do the same. If everybody that's listening to this does the same as well, don't have to be an elected official. We're all human beings. You see this, post it on your own and stand up for each other. We can change the world. And so that's what I'd like people to take away.
And we'll link in the show notes to one of those good posts of yours to share so people can grab our. Holly, any final thoughts?
Yes, I echo exactly what Kevin just said. And then the other thing that I will add is a lot of times people, they do look up to us as elected officials and they're looking to us as an example. And so the quieter we are or silent we are on any particular issue sends a message. And so speaking up, whether it's from the dais, on your social media, out and about in the community and letting them know, a lot of times they didn't even know it happened because people are not paying attention to what's happening necessarily and tuning into our meetings. And so I think you do have to amplify that to let people know. And the more people who are finding out about this, people are appalled, which is refreshing. It is not normalized. That's why I said I think we have a lot more love in our country and love in our towns than we realize. But people need to actually start expressing that more. And the more that happens, I think that does help tamp down a lot of this hateful rhetoric that's cropped up in the last, probably 15 years or so. It has gotten really bad. And people, to me, have crawled out from under rocks. And it's just gotten worse. And I think the more that we speak up, but also let our other elected officials know that we do have their back. And to your point, Jared, about what's in our toolkit, I think that it's high time that we actually start banding together to be more vocal when these happen. Whether it's, we still have Zoom, jumping on a Zoom, and all of us, if you got a bunch of faces in the screen, like the Brady Bunch boxes that are actually saying enough hate, we have to figure out something, because that happened the other day in Brentwood, and they were so appalled and kind of still shell-shocked the next morning when I found out. And they actually said, what can we do? Mm-hmm. And I didn't have an answer for them. other than you could share it, but they really wanted something actionable that they could do. And I think that's where a lot of communities are going to be, is trying to figure out what the next step is. And I think that's probably, if we put our collective heads together, we can come up with something to help shine a bigger light to let them know we're not going to take this anymore.
I have one suggestion on that I thought of, is having rapid response team. If it's happening in a city council, there's a group of 10 or 20 people that can all of a sudden receive it. One person can get a text, and then they could text their friends, and there could be 3 to 5 people who can call in at that moment with the opposite message. It's sort of a rapid response, right? You could call into a Zoom for 2 minutes if you're out to dinner, one of the two of you, right?
Yeah.
And just join in on the opposite side of it. Be vocal with the other message.
I love that.
That's great. That's absolutely terrific thought on that. One of the other things regarding rapid response that just triggered my memory is last week when we had a bunch of people that were calling in, again, the haters calling in on Zoom. Our city clerks in the county all connect with each other. Our city managers do too. I was notified through a group chat, El Cerrito was being Zoom bombed with hate. Our city clerk got the same exact message from the city clerk in El Cerrito. Our city manager did, and we were prepared because they'd started an hour before we did.
Mm-hmm.
We were prepared for it. And so we let communities know as well. So we're all working together in this. We weren't as tightly connected before as we are now, and that's just going to continue. So I do love the rapid response.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. I'd help call in, and I'm sure there's others too. And I probably have a whole bunch of hate mail coming my way. Well, thank you both for coming in and doing this episode and talking about this very timely and relevant topic in our communities. And that's what this is about, is to talk about what is happening in the East Bay. So thank you both for being here. I'm Jared Ash with the Capstone Conversation. Please hit subscribe today so you get the weekly updates of when we release the next episode. And in October, where this will air, we are giving away a $25 Amazon gift card to somebody that leaves us a 5-star review and leave the comments, whether it's on iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon. Thank you for doing that for us. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Capstone Government Affairs and Economic Development, a firm where I serve as managing partner. For more information, check us out at www.capstonegov.com and follow us on LinkedIn by typing in Capstone Government. Thank you for listening to today's show. Check out the show notes, and for a full transcript, visit our website, www.capstonegov.com, and follow us on LinkedIn by typing in Capstone Government, or you can find me, your host, Jared Ash.